What is up, everyone, and welcome to Drop In, where we have open, authentic conversations about all things mental health, including demystifying psychological assessment. Dr. Jackie.
Hey.
Long time no see.
All 10 seconds.
Why
Are you sick of me yet?
Why do we spend every waking moment together?
Oh my God. Stage 5 clinger over here.
We'll save that for our couples therapy. How are you?
Aside from the fact that I have not quite fully recovered from pickleball last night, I think I'm okay.
The pickleball in South Florida, humidity and heat in early September.
It still feels like an Olympic sport, just like walking from your house to the car.
I don't know how many athletic activities people have done out there in a sauna, but that is what it is.
That's literally what it feels like.
Just go to your local sauna and start jumping around, playing a sport in there, wheeling a basketball hoop or a net and hit a ball back and forth.
I'm so jealous of all of my clients that live in places that have seasons right now and are starting to actually experience fall weather. And I'm like, wow, I actually kind of miss that.
I do too. I get
famous last words.
We're both from the north, me being the Midwestern North and you the Northeast. And you do miss it a bit. But then it's January.
Yeah.
And you're on the beach and just watching those waves roll in that teal water. We're going to convince at least one person to move down here to South Florida. Be our friend. Get down here.
Come hang.
Psychological assessment.
Yes.
Something that people don't know a lot about. Mm-hmm. Not talked a lot about. Maybe you see it on a TV show here and there where someone's standing in front of a judge or in a courtroom and it's just like overblown. It's always life or death sort of stakes, guilty, mm-hmm. not guilty. Do you have a favorite psychological assessment?
Ooh, that's a good question. Like an actual test?
An actual test.
Yes.
And it is?
The PAI.
Which is?
So the PAI is a personality assessment inventory, essentially. So it tests all different ways of interacting with people. It tests a lot of different symptoms and things that could be indicative of mental health difficulties, but it really looks at the way that you interact with the world and other people. And I feel like it's so helpful just as like an overarching assessment tool because there is just so much information in it that can be used in a variety of ways.
I got to pick something different.
Was that also your top one?
We both love the PAI, and we'll break down what all these things mean in a moment, really talk through what psychological assessment is, what you might want to use it for, and the differences between that and what therapy is. I like the strong interest inventory.
Ooh, that's a good one. Different.
Not talked about a lot. But I think as far as just great utility of you finding careers that would be a good match for you based on your personality, mm-hmm. I always thought that was a cool part of it, of like the strong interest inventory is finding people who are happy or satisfied and said, yes, I love my career, mm-hmm. and they share your personality and traits. Mm-hmm. So it's like a good matching, because maybe many of us have worked that part-time job where you're like, I'm losing my mind.
Yeah.
Likely that job was a bad fit for your personality and what it requires from you energy-wise, stimulation-wise.
That's so different. I was not expecting you to say that.
Boom. Reaching into the depths for that one. Let's start out with, what is the difference between, a lot of people know what therapy is. Mm-hmm. What is the difference between psychological assessment and therapy?
So psychological assessment is used oftentimes for clarification, whether that is diagnostics or something else. So the way that I think about it is if you go to your medical doctor and you have chronic stomach aches, your doctor will probably be like, okay, let me ask you some questions. When did this start? When do you notice these symptoms? Is it after certain foods? Blah, blah, blah. Essentially, then if they're not 100% sure, or they want to make sure that something that they suspect, whether it's lactose intolerance, whether it is, diverticulitis, whatever, they are then going to send you for tests, right? Whether that's blood work, whether that's MRI, CAT scans, things of that nature. Those standardized types of tests where you are normed, you versus someone else. What is your blood saying about you? Those types of tests, that is what I kind of relate psychological assessment to, is the blood work, the MRIs, the CT scans, those types of actual research, science-based, standardized, structured tests versus meeting with your doctor and having them ask you some questions and give you a medication or give you a treatment plan. That treatment plan is essentially the therapy side. So assessment is using standardized tests to clarify something. Could be a diagnosis, could be any number of things, but most often it is diagnostically.
Describe that so well. It's interesting because I did not think you were going to give that example. And I'm like, oh, this is a really great example that I think most people can understand. Like when you roll up to the doctor, most of the time, they're not just going to be like, oh, okay, here's a pill.
Right.
And the times that has happened, I've had doctors be like, no matter what we might find, if we did an MRI, CAT scan, X-ray, whatever it might be, all roads point to this medication anyways. So we're going to save you the money of sort of having to spend all that we're just going to give you this medication. But in most situations, they need to know, what is this specifically? If you just roll up to your therapist tomorrow, there is a bit of expertise going on there where your therapist has likely talked to thousands of people. So, therapeutic expertise, you can start noticing patterns that are familiar. You're using maybe the DSM or something like that to say like, hey, what bin might these symptoms sort of be falling into? When we say that's not standardized, what does that mean?
So standardized means that these testing materials, these questions, this set of questions is studied. Each question within a test is studied, and making sure that it is either diagnostic or it is specifically indicative of this trait or characteristic. So it is tested, it is very structured, it is normed on other people.
Meaning it's been given to tens of thousands of other people, and we know it's predictive.
Right.
And it's reliable, meaning if we gave this same thing to you again another time, it's going to score very close, if not the exact same. So it's a reliable outcome if we give this item and ask you this question, do this task. And it's valid in that we know, for example, this is measuring anxiety, not stress, not depression, not something else. We talk a lot about, which we're not going to get too far in the weeds. Some people are having statistics flashback here, but it's both reliable, valid. It's been normed across, which we'll get into deeper later, across a variety of different cultural backgrounds, people, etc. We also know it is a better predictor than just a single psychologist or therapist alone. These standardized, normed assessments. And in the direction that you went, I think of it as like a mental health sort of GPS.
Yeah.
It's telling us when we do psychological assessment, it's telling us which way to go. And, if someone comes in and you just see a therapist, they might just pull from their, bag of tools and techniques that they know. But the question that sort of looms is, how do we know for sure that you're getting treated for the right thing, at least in the diagnostic sense?
Yeah. And one of the challenges with certain symptoms is that they can be indicative of multiple different disorders, right? So, for example, challenges with attention and concentration,
Oh,
right?
Lord. Yeah.
Could be indicative of anxiety, depression, some type of attention disorder, trauma. So there's all of these different possibilities that this symptom or symptom presentation could be associated with. So these standardized tests do a really great job of really differentiating between diagnostics and trying to decide, okay, is this symptom cluster, whatever it is that you're experiencing, is that due to ADHD? Is that due to trauma? Is that due to anxiety, depression, something else? And once we have a clearer picture of that, it can very much inform treatment because there are certain treatments that are best for ADHD. There are certain treatments that are best for trauma, for certain personality disorders. So, getting that clarification is often so helpful to just navigate what the best course of treatment is.
And you saying that reminds me of people I've done psychological assessment on. This is a common thing that can happen. They come in wondering, do I have ADHD? Lo and behold, it's anxiety and trauma.
Right.
And it presents very similar. Hard to keep attention. It's been there for a long time. I can remember times, in fifth grade feeling this way and scattered. Hard to get things done. There can be so much overlap. But in taking these standardized, tests that really target, can somebody sort of focus attention? Is this something within the realm of neurodivergence? And let's compare that to these tests that are really looking at anxiety, trauma triggers. And again, that's just the example that kept popping in my mind. I'm like, wow, I've seen that. Let's go through the different types of assessment.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
There are a ton.
Let's start with the one that everybody just loves and has fun with, personality. What is personality assessment?
Yeah, so that is overarching. Personality assessment can refer to different personality types, essentially, groups of characteristics, how you operate, how you navigate the world, how you interact with other people. A lot of the personality assessments also have diagnostic mental health questions that can also rule out or rule in any diagnoses or mental health challenges that person might be experiencing. So there are certain tests that really just look at diagnostics within personality. There are others that look specifically at characteristics and traits that you might have and interpersonal styles, and some have both.
So we're not talking about BuzzFeed quizzes.
Right.
Which Disney princess am I? I need to take some of those again. They're so fun. I think there's something about personality that human beings are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
How do I navigate this world?
Right.
What are different traits that we know have reliability and a predictability and are sort of stable across? We can talk about the big five. Mm-hmm. We also talk about Myers-Briggs. Some people hate, some people love. Does have reliability and validity behind it. But again, some people wonder about how practical it is. And I'm sitting here wondering what your code type is. I think you're an ENFJ.
Interesting. You're kind of accurate. Um, I've taken it a couple of times and I go back and forth because I teeter the line.
Here's reliability coming into question for the old Myers-Briggs.
I think it's because I fall very, very like directly at the midpoint
Mm,
for T and F. So thoughts and feelings. So I'm either an ENFJ or an ENTJ,
I can see
but
that.
it's a little bit like in the middle. I'm kind of both a thinker and a feeler.
To break down what these actually are, extroversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking, feeling, and then judging versus perceiving.
So it's basically a continuum for each of those.
Right. You lean one way or the other, and some people are more in the middle, which, yeah, there could be sort of debate of how helpful or not helpful, or whether people change or move through, how stable these are. But people really love personality assessment and knowing more about their personality because it applies globally to a lot of different areas, relationships, works, friendship, a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
From personality, ADHD, autism, sort of understanding neurodivergence.
Mm-hmm.
What comes to mind when you think about assessing for that?
I think this is one of the most, if not the most, helpful and applicable tests, mostly because of the weight that it carries and the implications if you are someone who is potentially thinking that you are neurodivergent. Because a lot of times this is the gateway to treatment and to accommodations and changes in lifestyle that can be such a night and day difference. And it's so validating for a lot of people. It is really the diagnostic testing to see if you are on the spectrum, if you have ADHD or some combination of the two.
This is the main testing that we're starting to do in our private practice because we know how important it is for people to be able to get accommodations,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's, in the educational world, whether that's in the work world, but understanding that the way you navigate it and what might be helpful, it might need to look different than other people.
Right. And when it comes to accommodations, this is super helpful because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to completely change everything. It could be that there are little tweaks that just make navigating your current world a bit easier. Um, and even in terms of medication, a lot of times it can be a challenge to get medication or to find a provider that prescribes stimulants, especially willingly. And I myself have had this experience. I've had a lot of clients who also have this experience where they have been either turned down by a provider or the provider doesn't feel comfortable prescribing a stimulant medication if they don't have testing or if they don't have a formal diagnosis through an assessment. So a lot of times this is really the gateway to having those conversations with a provider if medication is something that you want to explore and having the evidence essentially behind you to say, this is all of the testing that I have done. This is the confirmation that I have this diagnosis. And in these recommendations, it is recommending medication.
Absolutely. And I also think for children,
Mm-hmm.
people trying to navigate, our educational systems, school
Totally.
systems, it's about, and this is the challenge we face in general with education, is like there can be we're pushing everyone through in this one way, one direction. And a lot of this comes down to resource. It's not like it's teachers' fault by any means or even principals necessarily, but it's about understanding of like, how do we adapt with different people? We have such variability that exists, but in honoring neurodivergence, it's like, yeah, are there ways that we can tweak the education, the testing environment, you know, flexibility with sort of different assignments that this person is still showing they're knowledgeable, has nothing to do often with any sort of, IQ or intellect, but in the ways that we go about completion and, assess learning, that we can adapt with that. And that's where it's like, especially for kids, this can be so, literally change their trajectory within the educational system.
Totally. And I have a lot of clients who also receive accommodations for standardized tests, right? Like the state testing or SATs, ACTs, GMAT, LSAT, those types of things. And again, that can be the difference between actually taking a test at your full capacity versus being pushed through a system that doesn't necessarily show or have the capabilities of demonstrating your true intellect.
There's also, and I've had this with a lot of clients over the years, they want to know this about them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they felt like all my life, I've been told things about myself that make me feel bad.
1000%.
Am I hitting a
You
button?
might be hitting a personal spot there.
Right, but you think about the things like you were told.
Like, you're lazy, you just need to try harder, you're not applying yourself. All of the things that we're often told as someone who doesn't necessarily fit this quote unquote perfect mold going through school. And having that confirmation of like, I'm not lazy, I'm not dumb. My brain just works a little bit differently. And that doesn't mean that it's broken. That doesn't mean that I am not capable. That literally just means that my brain works differently than other people's. And it's such a validating feeling to have someone be like, no, these weren't character flaws that you were experiencing. This was something that was completely out of your control and that people didn't see within you. And to have that experience and be like, wow, okay, this is something that I knew I was experiencing, but to have someone put words to it and have the credibility behind it, it's very empowering.
It absolutely is. And it's life changing in so many different ways, but especially when it's like framing of the self. Because we know, obviously, as therapists and psychologists, is like when you carry around the frame that I'm lazy, like I'm lazy, other people get things done, and I don't. We know what that does.
Yeah, there's so much shame that goes with that. So much shame, so much judgment and blame towards ourselves. And being able to have that diagnostic clarification allows you to lift that a bit and to say, like, no, this isn't something that I need to shame myself for, but something that I just get to adapt to my environment a little bit differently and takes the blame off of you.
And that's the whole point when I see commentary on social media as a psychologist that I shake my head. I'm like, these people just aren't getting it. It's like, oh, get the diagnosis so you can use that as an excuse for everything in your life. And now you don't have to do anything or work hard anymore. That's bullshit.
It's complete and utter bullshit.
And it drives me nuts when I see that of like, again, and you did a great job opening this episode with a great like parallel of it's about knowing, understanding, and the whole point is to be able to not just for self-acceptance, but to know what are the paths forward that are going to be more helpful than your boss, your dad, your whoever just being like, you're lazy.
Right. And that's the difference, even if we go back to like the stomach ache example, right? If you are someone who is lactose intolerant and they don't, also hitting on a personal spot there for you. If you are someone who's lactose intolerant and they start giving you antibiotics to treat a bacterial infection, that ain't going to help your lactose intolerance. You're still going to be experiencing the same things. And
When I'm chugging a milkshake every day of my life. God, milkshakes are so good though.
your
So good.
downfall, that is truly your kryptonite. But it's kind of the same thing, right? And that is how it really is so helpful in terms of really paving the path forward to determine what treatment is the best for what it is that you're experiencing and knowing where that's coming from.
Absolutely. And so, we're talking about ADHD and autism because it tends to be like one of the most popular ones, especially in psychological assessment. But when we broaden that out to say diagnostic assessment, what are we talking about?
That's any kind of mental health diagnosis. So, yes, ADHD and autism are within that. Um, but when we open it up, we're talking trauma, we're talking mood disorders, depression, anxiety, personality disorders. So we're really looking at the full spectrum of diagnostics that anyone can be experiencing within mental health.
Absolutely. And it's making me remember when I got diagnosed as OCD, like I was completely unaware. Like I had thought, for lack of a better word, I lost my mind.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't be around people anymore, that these thoughts were so intrusive and so horrific that like this is it. Like I'm not going to be able to gain my mind back. Like it's looping around 24/7 from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. And I'm in the middle of my doc program at this point.
Yeah.
And this is sort of a lesson in why we can't diagnose ourselves. It's like you can have all this information, but
Right.
you're clouded by like living life through your own lens. But like, yeah, luckily I had a therapist who's like, this is OCD, right? And we took like a brief screener and like really talked it out. But I'm thinking about how that was so, as we're, naming, uh, relieving. This has a name. There are things we can do about this.
Right.
But when you're just like stuck in the shame of it all, with no name, no label of like, what am I actually experiencing here? You just feel helpless
Right.
completely.
Yeah. And I think that is the real benefit of being able to do this type of testing, is that for a lot of people who are experiencing these really impairing symptoms, it can provide, one, a path forward, but two, a sense of hope
Mm-hmm.
that things can be different and that this can change. It's not something that I am, forever stuck in this current severity reality of what it is that I'm experiencing.
Right. And listen, there can be a lot of good debate out there, and I see it, and I think it's interesting of like, these DSM labels, how they can at sometimes, be sort of hurtful in that they're not getting to like the source, as we talked about on previous episodes. It's like if the water is toxic because of societal things, political things, systemic things, how helpful is it to like zoom in at the individual and be like, you have major depression?
Right.
It's still naming you meet the criteria and symptoms for major depression, but the criticism is that's not the source. The source is you're living in a system that limits you, prevents you, makes you feel so hopeless and helpless that's where sort of we need to change and shift. And you can certainly do both at
Right.
the same time. But I think when we talk about things within our training psychologically, of we see how these categories, these bins can truly help people have a path forward. We're both lived examples of that.
Yeah.
And with the knowing, even if we reach a conclusion on a diagnosis, you're still much more than that.
Of course. Of course. And I think obviously psychological assessment is a helpful tool.
Right.
And I think, again, it's looking at the broader picture and being able to apply those types of things, but also taking into context the broader picture of the context and the systems that you're living in.
The culture, the system, all that, which is definitely a great listener question coming up that we'll sort of dive into further. So, touched on diagnostic, which is, I think, what a lot of people think of when they think of assessment. What about IQ? IQ testing, IQ assessment. What is that looking at? How could that be helpful?
Yeah. So IQ testing is looking at both your intelligence, like your general intelligence, but it's also looking at subcategories like math or vocabulary or general knowledge of, concepts or things along those lines. It's looking at your processing speed. It's looking at all of these different subsets of intelligence to see where you fall within the general population, but also within yourself, right?
Mhm.
So, like, you might excel at math and your vocabulary is, average, and your processing speed is slightly below average. So, it kind of gives you this overarching understanding of what your strengths and weaknesses might be relative to you and also relative to the general population. So when you're talking about especially kids who are getting tested for gifted or learning difficulties, even, that is the type of testing that you're looking at, is learning difficulties, relative strengths and weaknesses, overarching IQ, and where you fall.
And I feel that that moves into slightly into neuropsychological and cognitive testing. When would someone want to do that? Or when is that sort of like applied?
The neurocognitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of times cognitive testing or neuropsych testing is done either when you've had some kind of like traumatic brain injury or concussion or something along those lines, or cognitive decline.
Right.
So as you're aging and you're concerned about certain, forgetfulness, or I feel like, my memory is slipping or isn't quite as clear as it used to be, a lot of times it's helpful to have IQ testing, as a baseline, and then you can compare it later. So a lot of like pro athletes will do this, especially when it comes to football. That's one of the things that, neuropsychologists do, is they will test someone at baseline to get their like general IQ and get their overall intelligence, how their cognition is working. And then if and when they are injured or they are concussed or anything like that, they can then do follow up testing to see where there might be areas, or, people who have strokes. There are tests that then can help. Okay, these areas really need to be worked on, or these are the types of like occupational therapy that we can do for that type of brain injury.
Absolutely. You can talk about things like working memory. You can talk about things like processing speed, even things, especially when we get like age related cognitive decline, people's orientation
Mhm.
to current time,
Right.
not to give away items, but like, are they aware, who the current president is? Are they generally aware of like the date, the
Right.
time? A funny story in testing the mini mental status exam when we were learning it in school, which is just like a brief screener of like how oriented in time we were. I missed like 3 of the items. I had no idea what the date was. I didn't know, gosh, a few others. I didn't know what county we were
Oh
in.
my.
And there was another sort of obvious question, but like I just was unaware.
Yeah.
And I'm like panicking up
Just
there. I'm like,
floating through space.
gosh, have I experienced age-related cognitive decline in my like late 20s? But I just had no idea. Like,
Or
and that
am I just fully subsumed within my doc program.
No, but that's what we had a good conversation about, of like, what a good example of when you're, getting a PhD or in a doc program, of like how you just get so in the weeds of like, I do this, I gotta do that, that you're just not aware of these general things.
Right.
I don't even know what day of the week it is. I'm not exactly sure of the date. And I'm not allowed to check my phone. You ask me these questions. I don't know what county we live in. No idea.
That's hysterical.
So when you move to a new state for school, risk assessment.
Yes.
Risk assessment is interesting because it gets brought up. It's something, we do a lot in therapy. Therapists are often doing this sort of on the fly. What is risk assessment generally?
So the risk assessment that you're talking about is like typically referring to like suicidality, self-harm, harm to others, or that potential, which we do kind of on the fly, like you said. And that's can be kind of standardized, but typically, it's a pretty brief screen. Overarchingly, risk assessment oftentimes refers to like when let's say, company or a department or agency wants to assess either potential employees or someone's risk to themselves or others within the role that they might be put into. So this is a lot of what I used to do when I was doing pre-employment evaluations for police or public safety positions. A lot of those people have to go through a pre-employment process, and part of that is psychological testing. Part of that is personality. Part of that is looking at their suitability for the position. But it's also looking at what their risk or potential risk might be, again, to themselves, to other people or the community, to the department or agency that they might be working for, and what things might be done either to prevent that from happening, or looking at different things that might trigger that person specifically. So again, I was doing that for police and public safety and first responders. And that was through the agency that they were working with. I also did that with reality TV. So potential candidates for these shows that they're doing casting for. And the people obviously know that they're going through that process. It's not like, it's some backdoor, we're observing you through like this two-way mirror type of situation.
You don't know you're there. Yeah.
Right. But a lot of that is just assessing how the situations that they will be exposed to, again, whether it's a work environment, whether it is a TV show environment, how that might elevate that person's specific risk, and being able to say like, this might not be the best environment for them, or this would mitigate some of the potential triggers for this person.
What an important thing to have, nowadays, instead of just, this isn't a surprise to anybody listening, but these shows want drama.
Yeah.
Are you shocked by that? Hearing that out, you're like, oh my stars, I can't believe these shows want drama. But they're trying to find this balance of wanting drama, interesting television without being sued.
Yeah.
Put bluntly,
Fair.
That's it.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like a step in the right direction is at least having a psychologist or mental health professional evaluate and assess to see of like, is this going to be, in the best interest of everyone?
Right. For both the either production company or whoever it is that is wanting that evaluation, but also for that person.
Right.
Right. Like, I mean, hopefully you would think that like they don't want to put someone in a situation that is going to elevate their mental health difficulties to a severity level that is putting them in harm's way. And, you know, hopefully no one ever wants to do that. And I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt in hopefully
Yeah.
ruling that out. But
I mean, certainly there's been an evolution. It's just interesting. I think of like the earliest reality TV like I used to watch, like The Real World. And I remember watching a few seasons. This is really dating myself, where like there wasn't like a ton of like fighting or drama. And then I remember when it changed. And like every season there were these huge blow up fights. And now I think of just the norm. Every time I walk in the bedroom and you got Real Housewives on, somebody is screaming at someone else. And I just think how not real life that actually is.
yeah,
That's not, listen, and I understand individual difference or cultural differences or all kinds of differences. How often is someone screaming at you in your day to day life?
often.
Reality TV just isn't reality.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, very fair to say.
It could be someone's reality.
It could
Now
be,
I'm
yeah.
arguing against myself a little bit, but
Again, I would say that reality TV is much more real than people assume. But do I think it's most people's reality? No.
okay, fair. I can land in that space.
Yeah.
But I think we just know it's like if there's not tension or some sort of drama, like just with like even with TV shows that are fictional, it's like of course there's going to be tension. Of course there's drama. Of course that's what keeps you watching. I would love to watch a show that is like zero drama,
Just like
none at
watching
all.
people's lives.
Watching people's like there'd almost be something interesting about like that would be novel in itself.
Yeah, like the mundane day to day.
Yeah, like call it like the coffee shop, and you just like talk to people who come in, and it's like, but I'm sure people have drama in their lives though, so stuff would come up.
Right.
Anywho, forensic assessment.
Yeah.
I think this is what we think of when people watch their Law and Order, all their shows that are spin-offs of that, and the psychologist is up there saying this or that about the defendant or prosecuting. What is forensic assessment?
Yeah. So this is definitely not my area of expertise, but just I'll put that caveat out there. But my best friend is a forensic evaluator, so I kind of have her like knowledge. So a lot of what forensic evaluations entail is either fitness to stand trial, right? Like competency. But also evaluating and determining if someone has some sort of mental health difficulty that either contributed to them potentially committing whatever it is that they're being accused of or played a role in. And a lot of times that is where you'll see psychologists get up to do expert witness testimony, and they'll say, you know, how this specific mental health disorder impaired their judgment or they weren't aware of what it was that they were doing. And that's not to say that they end up like getting off scot-free, but it's more of like these are the potential recommendations of like putting them into a mental health treatment facility and, you know, having treatment as opposed to just going to a prison or something to that effect. But a lot of it has to do with competency to stand trial. Are they able to understand what it is that they are actually going through in terms of the forensic process?
Yeah, and not to name specifics, but people are aware in real life events where certain, people have been deemed of having, severe mental illness that played a role in what happened. And there gets you just not to get into deep ethics and morality and how we should be living as a society when people do heinous things and they have severe mental illness. It's like a whole nuanced,
Yeah.
different thing. But we're getting to the essence of like what we're talking about when we talk about forensic assessment and in psychology is
Mhm.
like determining what role
Mental health has
mental health
played.
played.
Yeah.
Very nuanced, very layered. Career assessment.
Hmm.
Something counseling psychology, because we are like, I don't know what to call it, brother and sister of like your clinical psychology. I'm counseling psychology. We're both under APA. Counseling psychology's history is largely in uh, educational work career assessment. So we took a lot and did a lot with career assessment. I feel like it's underappreciated.
Yeah. And also underutilized, I would say.
It definitely is. And most university and colleges have these standardized assessments, and like students aren't really aware of it. But especially when people are kind of like, where would a good work environment be for me? Like, what would I be doing? And not just based on, I'm interested in this, but again, core personality things like
Mhm.
social introversion, like
Right.
being more analytical, being more creative. Like there's a lot of different aspects that sort of play a role in thinking about you working this job,
Right.
many, many hours a week, how you may feel, because none of us really know. That's why I tell everybody it's like you could go to school for, 8 years and get some advanced degrees. You don't really know
Right.
how you're going to fare
Mhm.
in that career until you're doing it. And it's an unfortunate truth, but I always remind people that of like, you might like studying this topic. That doesn't mean you're going to like doing the work
Right.
day in and day out.
No, it's so interesting because I do feel like that's so underutilized because I don't think a lot of people are aware of it. Um, but there are absolutely tests that correlate interest and personality traits and characteristics with potential work options. And then there are also tests that you can do that a lot of times like employers at companies that actually like care and do like good leadership types of things will give some of their employees where it really looks at what motivates that person
Mm.
and what is helpful in terms of like the work environment for that person specifically. So I think it's such an interesting part of assessment that again, I don't think people utilize as much as they could.
Yeah. And I know you're touching in stuff that gets in the nuanced. Anybody right now can create a 10-question thing to say, I'm going to see how motivated you are to be a therapist. The things that we hope you're taking away from this are, has it been normed across many, many people, different cultural backgrounds? Does it have validity in that the items are actually targeting what it says it does? And is it reliable?
Right.
And
Like, is this an actual measure
right,
that was studied
right.
and deemed a standardized measure?
And this is when we get into things of like psychological assessment, which we're going to break down sort of generally what it looks like. There's a huge ass difference of someone sitting down and being like, here are 10 questions so we know you're going to be the best froyo employee we've ever had, versus something that's been shown, normed, has a lot of statistics backing it, factor analysis, item analysis, rater reliability. Some people are getting triggered, but
Me.
but like all these different statistics to show, again, it's standardized and we know this measures what we say it is. That's the difference between your BuzzFeed quiz and standardized psychological assessment.
It's so funny because when I think about how I used to think about assessment versus how I think about it now, it's so starkly different. Like I remember my doc program being like, I never want to do testing ever a day in my life because I thought it was all like stats and just like I don't know, boring like info that I would never actually use. And now I feel the complete opposite. Like, I feel like it is so helpful on so many different levels. And now I trust it so much more because I've done like thousands of them. And I remember even when I first started doing my postdoc, which was all assessment, I like still had like concerns or questions or like wasn't, it's not that I wasn't fully sold, I was, but I didn't have the perspective and the lens that I do now, where now, especially, you know, thinking about like the PAI and why that's my favorite, I did thousands of them. And every time I would look at the like results of that person's PAI knew the type of person that was about to walk into my
Oof,
office.
so
It
true.
was fascinating
Right.
because I had never met the person before or had any like background really on them before that. And just by looking at their scores and their, you know, test data, I knew the type of person or characteristics or traits that were about to be in that next person that I was seeing.
I can't explain to you if you're out there listening to this how true that is. And you might be like, what? Like, that sort of sounds judgmental. When you use a really great standardized assessment, what appears in front of you is their inner working world. It's right there in front of you. And it's accurate, more accurate than, oh, they saw this single therapist one time. Here's maybe the summary of that treatment. Night and day more accurate. It's not that we wouldn't, we value multiple data
Right.
points, which is the point we're about to get into about real assessment is looking at many different data points, interviews, standardized, whatever. We'll talk about that in 2 seconds. But it's so true of like when you get good standardized data coming through, I don't know many psychologists or therapists who would say that that doesn't paint a really great picture. Again, is it everything? No, of course.
Right.
You get all sorts of individuality and uniqueness, and human beings don't like to feel like, well, I'm unique. That's how we like to feel.
Yeah.
But trust when we say you really get blown away going through school of how accurate things like MMPI, PAI, these sort of standardized assessments can paint such a vivid picture of someone's inner working world that you just may not get otherwise, in a typical, 50-minute intake interview. Let's break down if someone's about to get any form, and there's going to be variations, but we're going to talk in general. If today I'm coming through your door and I'm getting some sort of psychological assessment, what are some of the steps we go through?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So typically, you come in for the first interview, right? You are letting the psychologist know what it is that you are looking to find out about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that is, I want to see if I can get accommodations for tests. I want to see, what is going on for me diagnostically. I'm looking to see what my characteristics are and how that impacts my daily life. So basically what it is that you are looking to find out. You will do typically an hour, 2 hour interview with the psychologist. Then the psychologist will put together a battery of tests, a number of different types of tests and evaluations based off of the questions that you have about yourself and the information that you're looking to find out. You'll have usually one or two, sometimes three testing sessions that are like, 2 hours, that kind of ranges. 2 hours, I would say, is the average testing time for any session. So you'll have a couple of testing sessions and then you'll schedule a feedback session. So after you take all of your tests, after the interview with that psychologist, they'll put all of that data together into a report that hopefully is readable for you. And then you'll have a feedback session with the psychologist to really go over, in layman's terms, what that actually means for you, what the outcome was of all of that data, all of the testing, and really talk through what the recommendations would be for you based off of the questions that you came in with, or the best treatment if that's what you're looking for, or recommendations for accommodations if that's what you're looking for. But really, that is your opportunity to ask any questions that you might have or find the best resources for you.
So in general, we have this like intake interview, which is a lot of like going down the path that maybe you're saying, I'm curious about, asking questions specific, but really diving into someone's history, education, maybe past trauma, cultural background, a lot of historical collecting. And then we use that interview to sort of inform what is going to happen, in the standardized assessments we choose. We use it to inform the standardized assessments we choose, but we also use it to inform the information we glean off of them. We score them, get the interpretive reports, we break down, and then we compile all these different data points, these different parts of information, stuff you're telling us, stuff we've observed in you in our time together. Again, sometimes in some cases, we're getting other people's observations of you, especially when you're dealing with children and assessing them. You might get a teacher's report, you might get parents' report. So, but we're using all these different data points and standardized assessment to come together and draw up a bigger picture of you.
Mm-hmm.
That is psychological assessment in a nutshell.
You're welcome.
But I hope that paints a picture of how that's different than therapy and how it's really targeted and helpful, and again gives you that mental health GPS of I understand myself better, and now I have clear ways, as you were saying, of what are my paths forward.
Right. It is a very structured type of interaction, right? So you're meeting with that psychologist for, whether it's 5 sessions, but all of it is very standardized types of questions and interview style. And again, putting all of that data and information together in one place so that you have all of that data and you can use that moving forward to pave the path and to have the clearest guidance on what would be the best options moving forward.
How about we get into some listener questions? We got time for a couple here. Thanks as always for asking them. We always get excited to see them.
Yeah.
See what y'all are thinking about. Dania asks a really great question here, really relevant, and a question a lot of people have when talking about this process. How do you adapt psychological assessment to patients from different cultures and countries? Really important question. I think a lot of this starts with, do you trust the standardized assessments, who they've been normed on? And you can look all this information up and see, but if there's an assessment out there who has never been normed on Hispanic population, yeah, I'm questioning
Right.
its sort of accuracy for a whole group of individuals. And this is something that's always being renormed, retested, re-expanded, but it's part of our job as psychologists to look at the norms and say, is this something that's going to fit?
Yeah, absolutely. And most of the standardized assessment tools that we use, most of these tests are normed on various populations and cultures and people from different backgrounds for that exact reason, because they want to make sure that this is not just applicable to some people, but that it's applicable to most and has that generalizability. It's also super important within the interview process to also understand your cultural background, what it is that impacts you, because that could impact the way that you read a question or what that question means for you. And again, most of these assessment tools are normed on different populations of people, so that way, that takes into account the way that people read the questions. But there are certain ways that we can also go in and kind of double check to make sure that this is still applicable.
I have a story that is exactly that. So when you're in school, you have school to become a psychologist. A lot of times your program will tell you, if you ever want to take this assessment, it's now or never.
Yeah.
Meaning once you're aware of, again, how this assessment works, there's a lot of questions of like, is it even valid for you anymore?
Mm-hmm.
So, as we do, I took everything.
Yeah.
Give me every standard as a test. I'm taking them all.
I want to see all of your results.
Oh, jeez. Nothing will be surprising.
No, I
you'd
don't
be like,
think
yeah,
so.
you could, whatever. But on one of the MMPI scales, which is a personality assessment, a widely used one, also can be used for diagnostic and is, I spiked into clinical significance for possible schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine my surprise. I was pretty surprised of like, what? So what we do is, and we do this, especially, when you're administering these things, I went item by item because you know what items score for that and relate to that. I'm somebody who has Buddhist beliefs, huge meditation, mindfulness, yoga practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Every single item. And it's funny, the only one that is coming up for me right now is sometimes I let my soul go.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, true. I do sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into it and spoil the assessment or anything like that. But the point is, even with just that, like sometimes I let my soul go. For me, I saw that through a lens of, oh, yes, when I'm deep into meditation, like I feel myself sort of leave my body and become aware of this like other state.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, item by item, I had justification based on my sort of cultural background, interests,
Sure.
that wasn't sort of into this realm of, which can get gray and, sometimes not as clear cut. That's why we trust things normed across tens and hundreds of thousands of people. But it culturally made sense for me.
Right.
And thus wasn't specifically explaining sort of me, walking through my day and feeling like my soul is just running out of my body.
Right. And that's the importance too of really being able to collect multiple data points. Again, whether that's through interviews or through standardized assessments, because another example, when I was working doing the evaluations for police officers specifically, a lot of people who are already officers would have to test to go to a different department if they wanted to, apply to a different department. And so some of the questions, like there is one, and again, not giving away, too much, but there's a question on one of the personality assessments that says, it feels like people are after me. And the reality is, in a lot of their positions, there are people that are after them or are coming for them or have run after them because of whatever incident they were put into. So certain questions or certain categories would kind of spike for that population of people. And therefore, we know okay, if we go through item by item and we're able to explain some of these, potential spikes, it's helpful because then we know, okay, this isn't indicative of either a mental health disorder or challenge. This is actually explained by the culture, the population that they are a part of, their experiences in these ways. So, again, having multiple data points helps to kind of tease some of those things out and actually get a very clear picture.
And this is why the interview
Mm-hmm.
and follow up in the human element of this is really important.
Yes.
Because if you can conceptualize something through their cultural lens,
Mm-hmm.
you can sort of understand more nuance of. It doesn't negate that it's been standardized, on hundreds of thousands of people, but it does leave room that there is still nuance to all this,
Right.
as we both gave examples of how that plays out. But that's why the human element of doing psychological assessment is really important. We
And
just
these are the things that we're trained to
You are
do.
trained to do and
Right.
follow up on and ask follow up on these items.
Mm-hmm.
So it is just all a part of the process. There's no perfect process though either.
Right.
We can both really be convinced of statistics and norms and know that that's better than some random person out there just saying like, yeah, it seems this way based on what?
Right.
Like, and we know standardized outperforms any expert's single opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I love the question because it gets into the nuance of why this is a human endeavor and why you need to follow up and dive deeper.
Totally. That was a great question.
We got time for one more here. Again, always appreciate your questions. Ask away if we didn't get to him this episode. Maybe another. A little different here. Anonymous out of Dubai. How do you know? And this is a question that gets asked all the time. So I was just like, yeah, let's get into it. How do you know if your gut is telling you something isn't for you anymore or if it's anxiety?
Ooh, I love that question. Go ahead.
This is where my mind goes with these things because I also get this asked like sort of like in the OCD realm. Something not being for you might not always feel very anxious or worrisome.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you can identify your anxiety roads, you can start to be like, wow, this is feeling overwhelmingly about anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Is it worry on top of worry that leads me to catastrophize? Of I'm worried my boss doesn't like me, and I'm worried that cuts might come up soon because this business is being taken over by AI, and I think I'd be the first one to go because my boss doesn't like me. It's like we've created this narrative of things with maybe limited to no evidence that is worry on top of worry that is into the deep catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding your unique pattern of how your anxiety manifests, I think does a better job of us saying, seems like this is, it has the anxiety flavor to it.
Mm-hmm.
When I hear something's not for me anymore, it's often this realm of sort of indifference or sort of other feelings being mixed into play. Maybe I'd like to do something else. And I don't know if we're talking about a relationship or a job. My mind is kind of shifting back and forth here, so bear with me. Maybe I'd like to be with someone else. But like sort of this shifting thing that might not be rooted in worry. Like anxiety's roots they're stem from worry. Where something not being for you anymore might not be worry, but more like indifference or boredom or some other emotion.
Yeah, I think it's always important to explore where that feeling is coming from, right? Because if, like Justin was saying, if there is this pattern that you recognize within yourself of, I tend to worry about this particular type of thing, whether it's relationships, whether it is, a job specific type of thing. I tend to worry about this.
Mm.
is this coming from previous experiences that you've had? Is this coming from things that you are experiencing within that dynamic that's triggering this anxious feeling for you? Because a lot of times we feel this anxiety feeling based off of either previous experiences or our specific patterns of anxiety. And really asking yourself, is this feeling that I'm having, is this rooted in reality, or is this colored by or painted by a pattern or a previous experience? And the other piece of that too is I work with a lot of people who don't necessarily feel like they can trust their gut or have lost a sense of trust within themselves, in terms of trusting that feeling of intuition. So the other piece that I would also explore is, again, where is this coming from? Is this coming from a place of misalignment, right? Is this coming from a place of this doesn't quite fit for me anymore? And what are the alternatives? Or is this something that I know I feel uncomfortable with, but I don't necessarily know if, I can make that change or what that means for me? So, overarching, explore that. Explore where that feeling is coming from. Explore what that feeling might be trying to tell you. And if there is roots in reality, if it is coming from a place of being influenced by a pattern that you know yourself to experience or previous experiences that might be shaping that thought process. And then being able to even kind of reality test or have a friend or someone that you trust or someone that you feel has your best interest at play, or a therapist or whoever, to explore that with and kind of get their perspective on it.
The way I think about it for myself is, if my feeling on this is adjusted by going for a run, spending some time at the beach, meditating, practicing yoga, playing a sport, I'm naming things that regulate me, which some clients we pick up and work with, they need to learn and get curious about what regulates you. If my feelings change, I just go for a great, hour and a half walk or whatever, listening to podcasts, enjoying the nice, cool Florida nights. Hope they come. And I feel differently about it. Probably anxiety. The nice thing about learning to regulate for you is you could sort of get at that, where when the times I've learned something isn't for me, it doesn't matter how much I meditate. It doesn't matter whether I just came from yoga. It doesn't matter whether I just spent a nice, 2 hours at the beach. I feel pretty much the same.
Right.
I feel like this isn't fitting. It isn't working.
Right.
But anxiety, you can regulate anxiety out. You can go for a real nice run, jog, and you feel a bit different about it.
Right.
You're like, I don't quite feel the same as I did. And to me, that's where it starts. Again, more signs that this is more of an anxiety thing versus, as you were asking, that something's not for you.
Totally agree.
One thing we agree on is psychological assessment is awesome.
Yes.
We hope we convinced you of that it's something that could be really, really helpful. Again, I'm stuck with your metaphor of sort of the physical health realm, that you get the MRI, you get the CAT scan, you get your blood work done. You do these things to sort of get that GPS and roadmap and know where to go. There are a lot of places you can go. mytherapyclub.com. We do psychological assessments. Of course, we're going to shout out ourselves, but we hope if you're interested you can look up ADHD autism assessment, IQ assessment. You can look up diagnostic assessment. There's so many different places out there that you'd be curious about this. Thank you for being here each week on Drop In. We always love a rate, a review, a comment. Always excited to see those, and we'll see you next time right here on Drop In.
Bye.
See ya!